Hey, painting students. What we'll be working on this week is we'll continue with our Kandinsky inspired pieces. We should have our first washes on. Our preliminary washes should be weak coloration. They should be really soft washes that we continue to build on and be able to put layers of either the same color on, and if we put layers of that same color, it's going to build the vibrance of that color, or we can layer other colors over top of that, and when you layer those other colors, it will alter the color, so it can cool it off or warm it up depending on what color you use. So what we're going to want to think about as we start to approach this part is where do we want our colors to be stronger? Where do we really want them to kind of draw your attention around on your composition? So now I have this this large main shape right in the center of my composition, and I really want that color to sing, right? So I want to build some vibrance there. I want to continue to layer some more violet on there. It's going to be the same color, but these additional layers are just going to make that color stronger. And I'm going to build that strength up slowly. I don't want it to be too strong because I don't want it to be the only thing you look at when you look at this painting. I do want your eye to be drawn to other objects and other colors and other interesting points on the painting. But as this is kind of a central element in the background, I do want it to look really nice and really balanced. So that's a color that I'm definitely going to build on. A color that I definitely don't want to build on is going to be in the background here. I'm going to keep this background color pretty weak and soft. What I might do is do some washes of just plain water and maybe do some runs in it. Those runs of different color will kind of make it look like this page is maybe stained or aged. And so it's already got kind of this yellow color, which already kind of gives the illusion of something having aged. And then I can build some runs of some other yellow colors on here. So it's not actually going back over the whole thing, but maybe just over the edges of the pages and just letting that color kind of spill out in natural ways into the puddles that I create. I'll show you how to do that. Also, after I build these more vibrant colors, these stronger colors, I'm going to start to add some ink. We'll see if we get to that this week. We may save that for last week for kind of a final step. You do want to save that for last, but some of these areas that I have kind of still white right around the corners of this object, this is all going to end up being inked in, so it's going to be some really strong blacks. So I should keep that in mind as I'm doing these other colors, that there's also going to be some strong black places throughout the image, and that adds a lot of weight to that part of the composition as well. My line work is going to end up being done with mostly fine tip markers. Some of these little circles and patterns and things, those will end up being done with ink. So just keep all of that in mind. Those things will change the composition as you start to build strength in your colors, and as you build strength in these lines, the whole thing is going to start to really come to life. So that's what we'll be working on. First, we need to go ahead and prep all of our colors, and so that'll be what I do next. And then I'll zoom in and kind of let you guys see what my process of layering looks like and share some of my thoughts as I'm going through it. Thanks so much, guys. So to start off with, I'm just going back over this center violet shape with just plain clean water. And then I'll fill that back in with another wash of this violet to kind of build the strength of that. But I don't want it to get too strong too quickly. That's why I'm using just the clean water at first. As soon as you see some of your brush strokes starting to show kind of the scratchy quality where it's running out of water, you need to reload your water. You shouldn't ever let your brush start to dry out when you're working with watercolor. Right? There's always fresh water going down. If it starts to dry out, it starts to look scratchy and sloppy. So I'm just going to keep reloading that. And that's eventually going to lead to your page getting kind of wavy, and that's fine. You just have to stop and let it dry out when that happens. And again, I'm working vertically. I would prefer you guys to work with your paper laying down. It's a lot easier to manage your paint and your water that way. All right, so I'm just pulling this puddle all the way out as far as I can to the edges of this shape. And then I'm going to start adding my violet in. You can see that paint's just going to go where it's already wet. It's going to stop before it drips too far on its own if it hits a dry place. Which is just reason to only get water where you want the paint to go. You can see that's not a super strong wash. It hasn't gotten that much darker, but it's definitely different, right? It's starting to build that value and the strength of that color. Should start to get to the point that it will cover up any of these pencil marks that are left on the page. While it's wet, you can dab up any little places you got where you didn't intend to paint. You can touch that up while the paint is still active, so that's while it's still wet. You see, the water's gonna kind of do a lot of the work for me. I don't have to force the paint anywhere. I can kind of help guide it along. But I don't have to brush in every little spot as long as that water is in the places that I intend the paint to end up at. So I'm just gonna kind of guide that paint around. All right, so I've gotten a decent layer on the violet. I'm still not happy with the strength of it yet, so I'll do another, I'm guessing 2 layers on there, but first I've got to let this one dry. I'm going to move around the page some. I think some of these blues that are outlines, I'm going to really try to strengthen those and get a real nice dark blue there, and those will kind of start to draw your eye outside of this center shape. So you'll kind of be drawn to this large center shape just because of the size of it. And then these darker lines will start to bring your eye out of there. And then I'm going to have to do something over here, maybe in this blue, kind of bring your eye, continue to take it across the page. I'll definitely need to emphasize this red down here so that your eye doesn't just start here and move across, but this red will need to kind of be a really strong color as well. And then some of this line work is going to need to draw your attention down to this bottom corner, because ultimately you want the viewer's eye to move all across the page. So that's what I'm thinking about as I'm going through and making these decisions on what I'm strengthening and what I'm leaving as is. Then with the blue, I'm going straight on because I want that to be really strong. I'm not doing wet paint into a clean pool of water. I'm just going straight on with the paint. I can see right now that my paint to water ratio is a little off. It's still a little weak, and so I'm going to add some more paint to that real quick. Hopefully that'll help strengthen this a little bit. There we go. Now I'm really starting to see the blue come through. I just didn't have quite enough paint for the amount of water that I had in that pool. There we go, and I'm going to do the same thing here. I want this to be a nice strong blue as well. Right now I'm just making sure that the area that gets wet is the area that I want to capture the color. And then I'll add some more blue into it. And then I can just drop some color in there and it should flow right around here. All right, so I'm going to leave that. I'm going to go ahead and, while I'm working in the blue anyway, strengthen this shape up here. Come back with a smaller brush just to kind of tighten up these little lines here between the two shapes. All right, next thing I think I'm going to do is I'm going to go into some of these reds. I'm going to really strengthen this one. Now the one up here, I'll strengthen it some. I don't think I'm going to draw as much attention here as I will here. This is just a small shape, so I think it's got to have a lot of value to it to draw the eye there, because this should be where everything else radiates out from. All right, where was with the violet shape, I'm building it slowly, right, because I don't want to make it too strong too fast. This one I'm not worried about making it too strong because it's such a small shape, so I'm going to go ahead and really build that red. I want to go ahead and get it dark because I'm not worried about building this one up slow. And then I shouldn't really have to worry about this shape anymore. I think that's probably going to be strong enough. I'll let it dry just so I can be positive. But I'm pretty sure that's going to be dark enough. And again, I'm just touching up the edges, covering up some of that line work from the pencil. soak up some of that puddle at the bottom so it doesn't drip down the rest of the page. So at this point, I have a couple things that are still at least slightly wet. So this middle shape is still wet. You can tell because the paper is still warped and distorted. It's kind of bubbled up. The rings around these circular shapes are still wet. And this blue shape in the corner is still wet. And so at this point, I have to start being careful where I paint. I've got several items on the piece that are wet. And so I don't want to paint any new paint next to pools of paint that are already on the page that are still wet, because those will bleed together and start to mix and look muddy, and your lines won't be sharp and crisp anymore. And so, especially with a Kandinsky piece, you want to try to keep that nice, crisp, sharp look to all your lines. So you're going to have to skip around sometimes. So right now, I don't want to paint right here, right, because it's next to a wet spot. I don't want to paint in this yellow, right, or in this circle here, because this purple's still a little damp and that blue's still a little damp. I don't really want to do this shape or the red, because there's still a wet circle that's connecting both of those. So what I can do is I can do some of these little things kind of around the edges on the periphery, and that's what I'm going to hop in and start doing.